Amaranta adjusted her white coat and glanced at her watch. The appointment would start in 5 minutes. She had been working as a pediatrician in a small private clinic in Montevideo for 7 years, and every morning began the same way. A stack of medical records on her desk, the smell of antiseptic in the hallway, and the muffled voices of patients outside the door. She opened the first chart. Angel Ochoa, age 6, primary appointment. Amaranta pressed the selector button. Please welcome the first patient. A skinny, dark-haired boy entered the office, holding tightly to the young woman's hand. His large brown eyes warily surveyed the room. "Good morning. I'm Dr. Salguero." Amaranta smiled, noticing the boy hiding behind his mother. "And you must be Angel?" The boy nodded faintly, not releasing his mother's hand. "My name is Violeta Ochoa," the woman introduced herself, taking a seat in a chair. "Angel has been having more frequent asthma attacks, especially at night. Our previous doctor moved to another city and you were recommended to us." Amaranta began her examination while asking the boy about his life. Gradually, Angel began to thaw, talking about school and his cat named Toro. His mother watched the doctor's every move carefully, and in her gaze she could see the worry that Amaranta had often seen in parents. After a thorough examination and recording all the symptoms, Amaranta prescribed a new inhaler and adjusted the treatment regimen. As she explained to Violeta all the nuances of taking the medication, she noticed the woman hurriedly jotting down every word in a small notebook. "Don't worry, I've written everything down in detail in the chart," Amaranta said softly. "And here's my card. You can call any time if you have any questions." After Ochoa left, the day went on as usual. Children with colds, checkups, immunizations. Amaranta loved her job. Every child treated, every grateful smile from parents gave her life meaning. At lunchtime, she took out a container of salad she had prepared the night before. Fabian had always made fun of her habit of preparing meals for work, saying that with their income, they could afford to eat out at restaurants. But Amaranta loved these little domestic rituals. The last patient of the day was a 14-year-old with suspected mononucleosis. After sending him off for tests, Amaranta filled out one last chart and shut down the computer. The clock showed the beginning of 6. On the way home, she stopped at the supermarket. Fabian had been working late a lot lately, and today she decided to make his favorite dish, roast beef with vegetables. As she picked out the spices, Amaranta remembered how they had met at a mutual friend's wedding 6 years ago. Fabian had just started his own business, but even then there had been a fire of confidence and ambition in his eyes. Their 4-room apartment greeted her with the usual silence. Amaranta put on some music, the classical collection they had collected together, and began to prepare dinner. The meat was already languishing in the oven when she heard the sound of the door opening. Fabian entered slowly, as if reluctantly. His usually perfectly ironed shirt was wrinkled and his tie was askew. But what alarmed Amarantha most of all was his gaze, faded, directed somewhere in the void. "Honey, what's wrong?" Amaranta approached her husband, trying to look into his eyes. Fabian sank heavily onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. "Everything is falling apart, Amarantha. Everything I've been building for the last few years." She sat down next to him, putting her hand on his shoulder. He smelled of cigarettes, even though he had quit smoking 3 years ago. "Tell me about it," she asked quietly. "Remember the investment project I talked about a month ago, the one with the Chinese partners?" Fabian raised a weary look at her. "They pulled out of the deal, just walked out, no explanation, and I'd already invested almost all of the company's available funds in preparation." Amarantha felt a chill run down her spine. "But there must be some kind of guarantees, contracts. They found a legal loophole. My lawyers say it's useless to sue." Fabian stood up and walked to the window. "If I don't find a way out soon, the company will be on the verge of bankruptcy." Amaranta stood up and hugged her husband from behind, pressing her cheek against his back. She could feel his shoulders tense. "We'll manage," she whispered. "We've always managed." Fabian covered her hands with his, but didn't say anything back. They stood like that for several minutes until the sound of the oven timer came from the kitchen. "I cooked your favorite beef," Amarantha said softly. "I'm sorry, darling, but I'm not hungry." Fabian gently released himself from her embrace. "I'm going to take a shower." Amarantha watched him leave for the bedroom and felt the anxiety growing inside. She had learned to understand his moods over their years together, and now she could see that something really serious had happened. Fabian had always been strong, always finding a way out of any situation. To see him so depressed was frightening. She took the almost untouched dinner out of the oven and mechanically began to clear the table. The sound of the water in the shower had stopped, but Fabian still hadn't come to the table. When Amarantha looked into the bedroom, he was already in bed, turned away from the wall and covered with a blanket over his head. The morning began with a phone call. Amarantha reached over to the nightstand, trying to fumble for the phone in the pre-dawn twilight. Fabian wasn't there. His half of the bed was cold and untouched. "Amarantha, are you awake already?" Mercedes's voice sounded unaccustomedly agitated. "Not anymore." Amarantha sat up in bed, trying to shake off the remnants of sleep. "What's wrong? Is Fabian at your place? He just called me, saying some strange things. I thought—" Amarantha got up quickly and walked out of the bedroom. The light was on in the study. Fabian was sitting at his desk with his arms around his head. Scattered papers and an open laptop lay in front of him. "He's home, Mercedes. I'll call you back later." Amarantha ended the call and cautiously entered the office. "Have you been up all night?" She placed a hand on her husband's shoulder. Fabian raised his reddened eyes to her. "Trying to find a way out. Called everyone I could. Even your friend," he chuckled bitterly. "You know what the worst part is? I didn't just let myself down. I have 37 people working for my company. 37 families who will be left destitute." Amarantha crouched on the edge of the table, taking his hand. "Maybe you should take out a loan or find new investors." "I've already exhausted the credit limit to develop the project. And new investors." He waved his hand at the laptop screen. "Who would invest in a company on the verge of bankruptcy?" Amarantha stood up and walked to the window. Outside the glass, a gray, dank dawn was dawning. She remembered how excited Fabian had been about each new employee, how proud he was of creating jobs. Now that pride had turned into a heavy load of responsibility. "You should get at least a couple hours of sleep." She tugged her husband's arm. "With fresh eyes, you'll find a solution faster." "What sleep? The workday starts in 3 hours and I'll have to face people I may soon be firing." But Amarantha insisted. After walking her husband to the bedroom, she called the clinic and warned them she would be late. Then dialed Mercedes's number. "Sorry about this morning's conversation. Can we meet?" Mercedes's gallery was located in the old part of town. Amarantha often came here on her lunch break. It was good to think among the paintings and sculptures, and her friend's sharp tongue helped her see things from a different angle. Mercedes was waiting for her in her office, a cozy room overlooking the old square. 2 cups of coffee were already steaming on the table. "Tell me about it." Mercedes motioned the cup toward her. "What's going on with Fabian? He called me at 4 in the morning, asking if I knew anyone in investment circles." Amarantha detailed the situation with the Chinese partners. Mercedes listened, tapping her long fingernails on the table. "You know what worries me the most?" Amarantha set aside her untouched coffee. "I've never seen him so broken. He was always optimistic, always believed in success." Mercedes stood up and walked around the office. "Are you sure he told you everything? I mean, big deals like this are usually insured, vetted by lawyers." "What are you saying?" Just that the situation seems odd to me. Maybe there's something else he's not talking about." Amarantha shook her head. "We've always been honest with each other. If there was something else, he would have said something." "You're too trusting, sweetheart." Mercedes walked over to the window. "Men often understate things, especially when it comes to money and business." At that moment, Amarantha's phone vibrated. A message from Fabian had come in. "Where are you? I woke up and you were gone." "I have to go to the clinic." Amarantha stood up. "Thanks for the coffee and for listening." "Keep me posted." Mercedes hugged her friend. "And remember what I said." The day at the clinic stretched on interminably. Amarantha kept checking her phone, but Fabian wasn't texting again. She tried to focus on the patients, but her thoughts kept returning to her morning conversation with Mercedes. Was her friend right, and was Fabian hiding something? In the evening, she stayed late at the clinic, going through patient charts. She didn't want to go back to the empty apartment. She knew Fabian would be late for work again. He'd been coming in later and later the last few days, and each time he looked more and more exhausted. When she finally got home, it was already dark. The apartment smelled of cigarettes. Fabian was smoking in the study again. She found him sitting in the dark, only the laptop screen illuminating his gaunt face. "Have you eaten?" he asked without taking his eyes off the screen. "Don't feel like it." Amarantha took a seat next to him. "Any news?" Fabian closed the laptop and the room fell into darkness. "Shareholders meeting tomorrow. I'll have to tell them everything." "And then what?" "Then?" He grinned unhappily. "Then the fun part starts. Asset sales, layoffs, creditor lawsuits, all the things I've been trying so hard to avoid." Amarantha felt a heaviness growing inside. She wanted to say something reassuring, to find the right words, but they were stuck somewhere inside. Instead, she just sat next to her husband in the dark, listening to his heavy breathing and the smell of cigarette smoke. A week passed. Amarantha noticed how their routine had changed. Now she woke up in an empty bed. Fabian would leave before dawn and return at midnight. The breakfasts between the two of them that had once been their little tradition were a thing of the past. An ashtray had appeared on the kitchen table, though Amarantha threw away cigarette butts every night and ventilated the apartment. That morning she decided to drive herself to her husband's office, bringing his favorite roast beef sandwich. The security guard at the entrance recognized her and gave her a friendly nod. Sitting in the reception area was an unfamiliar girl, a slender brunette about 28 years old, wearing a tight-fitting dark blue suit. "Good morning," Amarantha smiled. "I'm here to see Fabian Irarazabal." The girl gave her an assessing look. "Mr. Irarazabal has an important meeting. Do you have an appointment?" "I'm his wife." Amarantha felt mildly irritated. "And you must be the new secretary." "Dolores Villagrana, Mr. Irarazabal's personal assistant." The girl straightened in her chair. "I'm sorry, but he has a really important meeting. Perhaps you could keep this?" She glanced at the sandwich bag. At that moment, the office door opened and Fabian came out. He looked tired, but kept a straight face as he always did in the presence of the staff. "Amarantha?" The surprise in his voice was mixed with mild irritation. "Did something happen?" "No, I just—" She picked up the bag of food. "Thought you didn't have time for breakfast." Fabian glanced at his watch. "Thanks, but I really don't have time. Dolores, reschedule the meeting with the suppliers for an hour later and prepare the documents for the restructuring project." "Of course, Mr. Irarazabal." Dolores opened the diary. "Don't forget you have a conference call with the creditors at 3 o'clock. Amarantha watched this exchange of remarks, feeling superfluous. Fabian gave her a quick kiss on the cheek. "Sorry, honey, I have to run. I'll see you tonight." He disappeared behind the office door, leaving her standing with the package in her hands. Dolores defiantly tapped away at her keyboard, ignoring her presence. A fine rain drizzled outside. Amarantha walked slowly to her car, pondering what she had just seen. Where had this Dolores come from? Fabian had never mentioned a new assistant before. A busy day awaited her at the clinic. Among the patients was Angel Ochoa, a routine checkup after 2 weeks of new treatment. The boy looked better, his asthma attacks less frequent. He sleeps soundly now, Violetta smiled. You can't imagine what a relief that is. Amaranta mechanically filled out the chart while her mind reeled with the morning's events. She caught Violetta's attentive gaze. Dr. Salguero, are you all right? Yes, of course, Amaranta tried to smile. Just a lot of work. You know, Violetta paused. Sometimes it helps to just talk it out. If you'd like, we could have coffee after the appointment. Amaranta wanted to refuse, but something in the woman's eyes, maybe genuine concern or understanding, made her agree. They settled into a small coffee shop across the street from the clinic. Violetta told how she had been left alone with little Angel after the divorce, how she had to start all over again. Amaranta listened, and gradually the tension of the last few days began to let go. Now tell me what is troubling you, Violetta suggested gently. And Amaranta told her about the problems in her husband's company, about his condition, about her fears. She kept silent only about Dolores. For some reason, it seemed too personal. In the evening, she was alone again in their large apartment. A short message came from the office. Don't wait up, go to bed. Important negotiations. Mercedes's phone wasn't answering. It must be the opening of the exhibition again. Amaranta tried to read, watch TV, even started cleaning the pantry, but everything fell apart. At 11, there was the sound of a key in the lock. Fabian came in, loosening his tie as he went. He smelled of whiskey and cigarettes. Are you hungry? Amaranta asked, rising from the couch. No, he tossed his briefcase to the floor. You won't believe what happened today. She waited silently for him to continue. Remember that investor from Brazil? The one who was interested in our developments a year ago? Fabian paced the room nervously. He announced that he was ready to buy a controlling interest. For nothing, of course, but it was the only chance to save the company. And you agreed. Do I have a choice? He paused abruptly. His legal team is coming tomorrow. Dolores is already preparing the paperwork. Amarantha felt her back muscles tense at the mention of the assistant's name. When did you hire her? What? Fabian looked at his wife in surprise. Ah, Dolores. Last week. She used to work for a large corporation. She has a lot of experience in crisis management. And why didn't you tell me? Jesus, Amarantha. He rubbed his face tiredly. I've got a company falling apart and you're asking about a secretary. A personal assistant, she corrected. Fabian looked at her with a long stare. You know what? I'm too tired for this conversation. I'm going to go to bed. He left for the bedroom, leaving her alone in the living room. Amarantha sat on the couch, wrapping her arms around her knees. Mercedes's voice echoed in her head. Men often don't tell you the truth. Outside the window, the rain continued to drizzle, turning the lights of the city into blurred patches. The negotiations with the Brazilian investors were now in their third day. Amarantha hardly saw her husband. He left before dawn and returned at midnight. Their communication was reduced to short messages. Don't wait up. It's okay. I'll be late. At the clinic, she was on autopilot. Even little Angel noticed her absent-mindedness during another checkup. Dr. Salguero, you look sad today, he said, dangling his feet on the couch. Violetta threw a concerned look at her, but said nothing. After the reception, she lingered. Why don't we have dinner together? Angel is at her grandmother's tonight. Amaranta agreed. The prospect of another lonely evening at home seemed unbearable. They chose a small restaurant in the old town. Violetta told funny stories about Angel, and Amaranta gradually relaxed. But then her phone vibrated. There was a message from Fabian. Come home right away. We need to talk. Sorry, I have to go. Amarantha hurriedly pulled out her wallet. Is everything okay? Violetta caught her arm. You know you can count on me, right? Amaranta squeezed her fingers gratefully and hurried toward the exit. At home, she caught an unusual sight. Fabian was sitting in the kitchen drinking coffee. He hadn't even gone into the kitchen in recent weeks, preferring to work in the study. What's wrong? Amarantha stopped in the doorway. Have a seat, he motioned her a cup. There's a way out of this. Something in his voice made her wary. What about the Brazilian investors? Forget about them, Fabian waved them away. They wanted to take the company for nothing, but they made me a different offer today. He fell silent, scrutinizing his hands. What kind of offer? Amaranta asked quietly. There's a firm in Paraguay. They are willing to contract with us for a large sum of money, enough to cover all the debts and even come out on top. And what's the catch? Fabian stood up and walked to the window. The contract will be not exactly legal. Some of the money will get past the official records. A small violation of tax laws, nothing serious. Amarantha felt a chill go down inside. Nothing serious? That's a criminal offense. Only if we get caught, he turned to her. And the scheme has been worked out. The risk is minimal. Dolores has already prepared all the paperwork. Dolores? Amarantha stood up abruptly. What does your assistant have to do with this? She has experience in this sort of thing. She worked for a company that... He paused. It doesn't matter. What matters is that this is our only chance. And if you say no... Fabian sank heavily into a chair. Then we'll have to declare bankruptcy, sell the house, the car, and still not enough to pay off the creditors. 37 people will lose their jobs, and me. I'll lose everything I've spent the last few years building. Amarantha looked at her husband, gaunt, aged in recent weeks. She remembered how he'd glowed with pride when he'd shown her his first office, how excited he'd been about each new contract, how he'd taken care of the employees. How much time do you have to decide? Until tomorrow night, he rubbed his temples. They're waiting to hear back. I need to think. Amarantha headed for the door. You too. She walked out of the apartment and got into the car. Her hands shook as she dialed Mercedes's number. Can you come over? Right now? The gallery was already closing when she pulled up. Mercedes was waiting for her at the entrance, nervously smoking a thin cigarette. What's wrong? You sounded so... They went up to Mercedes's office. Amaranta told her everything about the Paraguayan firm, about the illegal scheme, about Dolores's involvement. And what do you think? She asked, finishing the story. Mercedes was silent, tapping her fingernails on the table. You know what the problem is? It's not that the scheme is illegal. It's that this Dolores is too good at everything. What do you mean? Think about it. She shows up in the middle of a crisis, supposedly happens to have experience in this sort of thing. Mercedes put out her cigarette. Don't you think that's strange? Amaranta remembered Dolores's cold stare, her over-informedness, the way she had interacted with Fabian. But that's not what matters now, she shook her head. What am I to do? What should I do? What does your intuition say? Amarantha closed her eyes. That it's wrong. That you can't solve some problems by creating others. But you're afraid of losing everything, Mercedes finished for her, including your husband. Yes. Mercedes stood up and poured them both wine. Listen to me carefully. If Fabian agrees to this venture, there is no turning back. Once he breaks the law, he can't stop, and you will be an accomplice. But what do I do? Talk to him. Talk to him again. Try to find another way out. Maybe sell some of the assets, restructure the company. It was past midnight when Amaranta returned home. Fabian was waiting for her in the living room. I've made up my mind, he said without looking at her. I'll sign the contract tomorrow. Amaranta sat down across from him. Is there really no other way out? No. He finally looked her in the eye. I've calculated everything. This is the only way to save the company. And you're willing to risk everything? Your freedom? Your reputation? What do I have to lose? He grinned bitterly. Without the company, I'm nothing. Just a loser who couldn't keep the business going. Amarantha wanted to object, to say he meant so much more to her than his business. But the words stuck in her throat. She could see the decision had already been made. When is the signing? Tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the evening. Dolores has all the paperwork ready. There was that name again. Amarantha felt everything inside clench. Do you trust her completely? Why wouldn't I? She's a professional. Amarantha stood up. I hope you know what you're doing. She went upstairs to her bedroom, but sleep wouldn't come. Mercedes's words about there being no turning back were spinning in her head. It was beginning to get light outside the window when she finally fell into an anxious slumber. After signing the contract with the Paraguayan company, life began to change rapidly. It was as if Fabian had become a different person. The depression of the last few weeks was gone. His old vigor had returned. But there was something new. A cold, calculating look in his eyes, a sharpness in his movements, an irritability at the smallest things. Amarantha watched these changes with growing anxiety. Now her husband often spoke on the telephone in whispers, locked himself in his study, and answered her questions irritably. The less you know, the better you sleep. One morning she found on the kitchen table a glossy catalog of luxury real estate laid on a page of luxury villas. What's this? She asked when Fabian stepped out of the shower. Oh, this. He flipped through the catalog carelessly. Just looking at options for investment. Things are going well. Time to think about expanding. But we're just starting to get out of debt, aren't we? Fabian threw the catalog on the table irritably. You don't understand anything about business. You need to invest while you can. He walked away, leaving the unfinished coffee. Amarantha picked up the catalog. On the cover was a villa with a swimming pool somewhere on the coast. At the clinic, she was in for a surprise. Violetta came in without Angel, alone. I wanted to talk, she said, taking a seat in the visitor's chair. As a friend, Amarantha set aside the patient charts. Is something wrong? That's what I wanted to ask you, Violetta pitched forward. You haven't been yourself lately. I can tell. Amarantha wanted to reply with the usual, everything's fine, but suddenly felt she couldn't keep it to herself anymore. She told Violetta about the contract, about the changes in her husband's behavior, about her fears. I worked in a bank until Angel was born, Violetta said thoughtfully, and I saw many stories like that. They never ended well. What do you mean? Once people cross the line once, it's hard to stop. Money changes people, especially easy money. At that moment, a nurse peeked into the office. Dr. Salguero, there's a patient waiting. Violetta stood up. Be careful, and remember you have friends. The day stretched on endlessly. In the evening, Amarantha went to Mercedes's gallery. She needed someone to talk to, but in the gallery she received an unpleasant surprise. Through the glass door, she saw Dolores talking animatedly with Mercedes. They were standing by a large abstract painting, and Dolores was vigorously explaining something, waving her hands. Amarantha retreated into the shadows. 15 minutes later, Dolores came out, clacking her heels on the sidewalk. Mercedes walked her to the door. What was she doing here? Amarantha emerged from her hiding place. Mercedes shuddered. Oh my God, you scared me. Come in, we need to talk. In the study, Mercedes poured them both some wine. She came to buy a painting. She said it was for Fabian's office. And how much did she want to pay? $15,000. Mercedes shook her glass. For a job that cost 3 times as much. Amarantha felt herself grow cold inside. Money laundering? Looks like it, Mercedes set her glass down. I refused, of course. Said the painting was already sold. Thank you. You're welcome. Mercedes lit a cigarette. But you need to be very careful. That woman is dangerous. When Amaranta got home, the lights were on in the apartment. Fabian was sitting in the living room with a glass of whiskey. Where have you been? He asked without looking at her. At Mercedes's. Oh, really? Didn't your friend tell you about today's visitor? Amarantha froze. You knew Dolores was coming to the gallery? Of course, he finished his whiskey. It was my idea. We need to diversify our assets. You wanted to use my friend to launder money? Fabian stood up abruptly. Don't say such words. It's business, just business. But your friend turned out to be too principled. Or just honest. Honest? He laughed unhappily. In this world, honest people end up in poverty. Is that what you want? I want you to stop before it's too late. Too late? He stepped close to her. Do you have any idea how much money has gone through the company in the last month? We've never lived so well. He smelled of whiskey and cigarettes. That smell, so foreign, made her pull back. Money changes you. They change everyone. He turned away. By the way, I'm flying to Asunción tomorrow, for 3 days. With Dolores? Yes, with Dolores. She's doing all the paperwork. Amaranta went up to the bedroom. She lay awake for a long time, listening to Fabian pacing downstairs, talking on the phone, drinking again. In the morning, he left early without even saying goodbye. On the kitchen table lay a note. Back on Saturday. Don't miss me. At the clinic, she worked like a fog. After lunch, Violetta came in with Angel a routine checkup. You look exhausted, Violetta said as the boy stepped out into the hallway. He's in Paraguay, with her. Violetta nodded understandingly. Let's go to our place. Angel will be pleased and I'll make your favorite herbal tea. Violetta's small apartment breathed warmth and comfort. Angel showed his drawings, talked about school, and then fell asleep on the couch. She and Violetta sat in the kitchen, and Amaranta could feel the tension of the last few days gradually letting go. You know, Violetta said, pouring tea, after the divorce, I thought my life was over, and then I realized it was just beginning. Sometimes you have to lose something to find yourself. Amaranta looked out the window, where the first stars were lighting up against the darkening sky. I'm not afraid of losing money or status. I'm afraid of losing him, the Fabian I used to know. Maybe you've already lost him, Violetta asked quietly. That night, Amaranta stayed with them, lying on the couch, listening to Angel's quiet breathing from the next room. She thought about how strangely life worked. She now felt more at ease in someone else's house than in her own. 2 months passed. Fabian's company was flourishing. He had bought a new office in the business center. The staff had tripled. New contracts and new partners appeared every week. Money flowed, and Fabian's ambitions grew with it. One morning he walked into the bedroom holding a glossy booklet. Look what I found. He handed the booklet to Amarante. A mansion in a gated community overlooking the ocean. 3 floors, pool, winter garden. Amarantha flipped through the booklet. That's insanely expensive. We can afford it now. He sat down next to her. It's high time you quit that clinic of yours. You'll make a home, go to the spa, paint. You've always wanted to learn to paint. She looked at her husband. Impeccable suit, expensive watch, confident smile. Where had gone that confused man who 2 months ago had been afraid of losing everything? I love my job. Come on, he waved his hand. What could possibly be fun about examining snot-nosed kids? You deserve better. At that moment, his cell phone rang. Fabian glanced at the screen and quickly left the room. Through the wall, Amarantha could hear scraps of conversation. Yes, Dolores. Of course. Book tickets for tonight." At work, she was in for a surprise. Violetta came to the reception without Angel. "I got a promotion," she said, glowing. "I'm now a department manager at a bank. And guess what? There's an opening at our medical center for a pediatrician. The pay is higher. The equipment is better. You came to offer me a job?" "I came to offer you a choice." Violetta covered her hand with her own. "You said yourself that you're underpaid here." Amaranta leaned back in her chair. True, the private clinic was barely making ends meet. Wages were late. But these walls had become a second home to her. That evening she told Fabian about the offer. His reaction was unexpectedly harsh. "Don't even think about it. No work. I want my wife to take care of herself, not other people's children." "But, no buts." He pounded his fist on the table. "You'll write your resignation tomorrow, and we're going to go see that mansion." Amarantha silently left the room. It had become useless to argue with Fabian lately. He didn't tolerate objections. The next day she wrote a letter of resignation. The farewell to her colleagues was hard. Many cried, hugged her, asked her to stay. The last to arrive was little Angel and his mother. "You won't be my doctor anymore?" he asked, sniffing his nose. "They'll find you another. A good doctor," Amaranta tried to smile. "But I don't want another." Violetta led her sobbing son away, casting Amaranta a sympathetic glance. A surprise awaited her at home. A new easel, paints, and brushes stood in the living room. Fabian was proudly pointing at this splendor. "I've enrolled you in a painting class. Private lessons. Best teacher in town." Amaranta looked at the easel, and instead of joy, she felt only emptiness. Fabian made decisions for her without even asking her opinion. A week later they moved into the new mansion. Huge rooms with high ceilings, marble staircases, a heated swimming pool. Everything screamed wealth. But Amarantha was uncomfortable here. She was lost in these spaces, bumping into the corners of expensive furniture. Fabian was hardly ever at home. Business meetings, business trips, important negotiations, always with Dolores. She became his shadow, impeccably dressed with a cold smile and an attentive gaze. One morning, down by the pool, Amaranta heard their voices coming from Fabian's home office. "Are you sure there won't be any traces left?" Her husband's voice sounded concerned. "Absolutely," Dolores's voice purred. "I've got it all worked out. The money will go through 3 offshore companies, then convert it into shares, then—" Amarantha walked away quickly. She didn't want to know the details of their machinations. The days stretched slowly. Painting lessons were no fun. She felt like a student doing her homework. The pool was empty. It was boring to swim alone. At the spa, where Fabian had signed her up, she felt like an extra among the elegant ladies discussing their latest purchases. She began to frequent Violetta's. Her small apartment, smelling of cinnamon and baby soap, breathed easier. Angel showed her his drawings, told her about school. Violetta made her favorite herbal tea, and they could talk for hours about anything. "Why didn't you go to work at that medical center?" Violetta asked one day. Fabian forbade it. "Forbade?" Violetta frowned. "You're a grown woman. You have a profession, a vocation. How can he forbid anything?" Amarantha remained silent. She herself did not understand how she had allowed herself to be driven into this golden cage. In the evening she ventured to speak to her husband, but Fabian wouldn't even listen. "You have everything a woman can dream of. A house, money, free time. What else do you lack?" "Myself," she said quietly. "What?" "I miss myself. The person I was. The doctor who helped children." Fabian waved her away irritably. "Stop being dramatic. Better pack my suitcase. Dolores and I are flying to Buenos Aires tomorrow. Important negotiations." "With her again?" "Yes, again with her. She's my assistant, my deputy. She knows business better than anyone." At night, Amarantha could not sleep. She went down to the living room, turned on the table lamp. In the dim light, the mansion seemed even more alien. On the table was Fabian's day planner. He never left it at home. Apparently, he'd forgotten it in his haste. She opened the last page. Dinner with Dee at the Mare restaurant, 8 o'clock. It was written down for last Friday, the day Fabian had said he had an important meeting with investors. Slamming the day planner shut, Amaranta walked to the window. She was reflected in the dark glass, in an expensive silk robe with a fashionable haircut. So beautiful, so empty. At that moment, Fabian's cell phone rang upstairs. He had left it on the bedside table. Amaranta went upstairs to the bedroom. Dolores came up on the screen. The phone kept ringing. Amarantha stared at the glowing screen where Dolores's name flashed. 3 in the morning was too late for a work call. Fabian stirred next to her but didn't wake up. After a minute, the phone went silent, but immediately a message came through. Amarantha froze. Should she pick up the phone? Read it? There used to be no secrets between them. They often used each other's phones without asking permission. But lately, Fabian always carried his phone with him, and if he left it behind, he turned on the screen lock. She reached out and picked up the phone. The screen popped up. One new message. Need to know the password. 4 digits. She tried their wedding date. Wrong. His birthday. Wrong again. The date the company was founded. Wrong again. Suddenly Fabian moved and mumbled something in his sleep. Amaranta quickly put the phone down and went back to bed. Her heart was pounding like crazy. In the morning, she woke up to the sound of a shower. Fabian was already getting ready for work. There was no phone on the nightstand. "I'm going to be late today," he said, tying his tie. "Important negotiations." "With Dolores?" she blurted out. Fabian froze for a second. "Yes, with Dolores. She's my deputy, remember? She called last night." "What?" He turned around. "Are you checking my phone?" "No, just heard the call. 3 o'clock in the morning, Fabian. What kind of urgent business matters at 3 in the morning?" "Don't get me started," he grabbed his briefcase irritably. "We have international contracts, different time zones, and stop following me." He left, slamming the door. Amarantha remained sitting on the bed, looking at his untouched cup of coffee on the bedside table. An hour later, she was already sitting in the cafe with Mercedes. Her friend listened silently, tapping the cup with her fingernail. "So, calls in the middle of the night," she finally said. "And the password on the phone? And then there's those constant business trips, always with her." Mercedes lit a cigarette. "Have you checked accounts? Credit cards? There's always a trail there. Restaurants, hotels." "I don't have access to company accounts and personal accounts." Amarantha fell silent. She didn't even know how many accounts they had now, or in which banks. "Honey, you live like a bird in a golden cage. He has complete control over your life, your work, your money, your time, and yet he's—" "Don't tell me," Amarantha held up a hand. "I need to be sure." "And what are you going to do?" "Follow him." Mercedes choked on her smoke. "What, are you serious?" "Absolutely. He said it's an important negotiation today. Let's see if that's true." "And how are you going to do that? You don't even have your own car. He insisted you use a driver." Amaranta smiled. "You have a car, though. Can you help?" Mercedes shook her head. "You're crazy, but I'm in." They parked in front of Fabian's office at 5 in the evening. The luxurious glass and steel building soared into the sky. "His car is still here." Mercedes nodded at the black Mercedes in the parking lot. "And Dolores's car, too." Amaranta pointed to a red sports car. They were waiting. 6, 7, 8 p.m. The employees were going home. The lights were out in the office windows. Only Fabian's office on the 20th floor was still lit. "Maybe they're really working," Mercedes suggested uncertainly. At that moment, 2 people came out of the building, Fabian and Dolores. She was talking animatedly about something. He was laughing. They got into his car. "Follow them," Amaranta said quietly. Mercedes started the engine. Are you sure? Yes. They followed the black Mercedes through the city. The car turned toward the ocean. Strange route for a business meeting, Mercedes muttered. The Mercedes stopped in front of the Mare restaurant, the same one that had been written down in Fabian's diary. Amaranta saw Dolores get out of the car, Fabian walk around the car and open the door for her, how they enter the restaurant together. Do you want to go in there? Mercedes asked. No, Amarantha clenched her fists. Let's go home. All the way home, she was silent. Mercedes didn't try to make conversation. She knew what was going on in her friend's soul right now. At home, Amaranta went up to Fabian's office first thing. Now that she knew what to look for, everything seemed obvious. Bills from restaurants, tucked away in a business expense folder. Hotel reservations, ostensibly for business associates. Tickets for 2 to Buenos Aires, Santiago, Lima. In a desk drawer, she found a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond bracelet, clearly not cheap. The card said, Dolores. The ink wasn't dry yet. Amarantha carefully put everything back. She went down to the living room and poured herself some wine. Her mind reeled with fragments of phrases, casual glances, small details she had not noticed before or did not want to notice. Fabian returned at midnight. He smelled of expensive wine and feminine perfume. How did the negotiations go? Amarantha asked. Fine. He didn't even look in her direction. All matters are settled. At the mayor's restaurant? He froze in place. What? Nothing, just asking. Fabian went upstairs in silence. A minute later, she heard the sound of water pouring. He was taking a shower. Amaranta opened her phone and texted Mercedes. Need to talk tomorrow. I have an idea. The reply came instantly. Come over in the morning. We'll figure something out. She erased the correspondence and went up to the bedroom. Fabian was already in bed, pretending to be asleep. Amarantha lay on her side of the bed, looking up at the ceiling. There was less than a meter between them and a whole chasm. In the darkness, his phone rang again. This time, Fabian quickly grabbed the receiver and walked out of the bedroom. Through the closed door, she could hear his muffled voice. Yes, everything's fine. No, he doesn't suspect. Sure, I'll see you tomorrow. Amarantha closed her eyes. A plan of action was already forming in her head. She would no longer be a helpless bird in a golden cage. It was time to take action. The morning began with a headache. Amarantha opened her eyes with difficulty. Last night's wine and sleepless night were taking their toll. Fabian was gone, only a crumpled pillow and the slight smell of his perfume. There was a note on the kitchen table. I'm going to Lima for 2 days. I'll be back on Wednesday. Don't miss me. The handwriting was sloppy, hurried, as if he'd written it on the run. Amarantha crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. The studio where she took painting lessons was cool and quiet. The instructor, an elderly artist with a gray beard, was demonstrating the technique of working with oil paints. Amarantha mechanically repeated his movements, but her thoughts were far away. You're having trouble concentrating today, the instructor remarked. Why don't we take a break? She shook her head. No, I'm fine. Just a little tired. Art requires peace of mind. He gently took the brush from her. Come back tomorrow when you're ready to create. On the way home, the sky clouded over. Large raindrops drummed on the roof of the car. The driver, a slight elderly man, turned the windshield wipers on to maximum speed. Senora wishes to stop somewhere? He asked, looking in the rearview mirror. Amarantha wanted to answer no, but suddenly changed her mind. Yes, to the shopping center on Avenida Libertad. At the large mall, she wandered between the boutiques, looking at the window displays. Fabian had insisted that she dress appropriately for their new status. Expensive brands, jewelry, designer handbags. She'd resisted before, but now. An hour later, She emerged from the boutique in a tight new burgundy-colored dress, high heels, brightly painted lips. Let Fabian see what he was losing. The rain intensified. The driver opened an umbrella over her, escorting her to the car. They were already pulling up to the house when Amarantha felt dizzy. She hadn't had breakfast and then skipped lunch. "Excuse me, let's stop at the pharmacy. I need to get some medicine for my headache." The pharmacy smelled of medicine and antiseptic, such a familiar smell from her past life. Amarantha bought a painkiller and was about to leave when she heard a familiar voice. "Good afternoon. I need some motion sickness pills. It's a long flight tomorrow." Dolores was standing at the next checkout counter. She didn't notice Amarantha. She was too busy talking on the phone. "Yes, honey, I've already packed my suitcase." No, she has no idea about anything. Of course, the Maldives is a great idea. Amarantha slipped quietly out of the drugstore. In the car, she swallowed 2 pills and leaned back in the seat. She drove aimlessly around the city for another Ocala 2 hours, until she finally decided to say, "Home, please. I'm very tired." The mansion greeted her with a resounding silence. Amarantha went up to the bedroom, going to change and lie down, still dizzy, and then she heard sounds. At first she thought it was the sound of water in the pipes, but then she heard voices, muffled laughter. The sounds came from the guest bedroom in the far wing of the house. She took off her shoes and tiptoed to the door. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought its pounding should be heard in the hallway. The door was ajar. Through the crack, Amarantha saw scattered clothes, crumpled sheets, and 2 silhouettes on the bed. One of them belonged to her husband. "I missed you," Fabian's voice sounded hoarse. "Couldn't wait until tomorrow." "What about Lima?" Dolores purred. "To hell with Lima. We're flying to the Maldives tomorrow. I've already organized everything." "And your wife?" Fabian laughed. "What difference does it make now? I've transferred all the money into offshore accounts. She'll be left with nothing. Let her go back to her clinic to treat snot-nosed kids." "She still doesn't suspect a thing?" "That naive fool believes everything I say." "Important negotiations, darling. A business trip, honey." They both laughed. Amarantha silently backed away from the door. Her ears were noisy and red spots swam in front of her eyes. She walked slowly down the stairs, holding on to the banister. In the living room, she poured herself some water, but the glass trembled in her hand, splashing drops onto the expensive carpet. Their voices still echoed in her head, mocking, cruel. "Phone. I should call Mercedes. No, can't. She might give herself away with her voice. Cab. Get out of here now." With trembling fingers, she dialed the cab number. The dispatcher said the car would be there in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Need to make it 15 minutes without giving away her presence. Amarantha sat in the chair, clutching the phone in her hands. Muffled voices and laughter came from upstairs. Finally, the phone vibrated. A cab at the gate. She tiptoed to the exit, quietly opened the door, and slipped out into the rain. "Where are we going?" the cabbie asked. The first address that came to mind was Artigas Street, 25. Violetta opened the door and, aghast, "My God, what happened?" Only now did Amarantha notice that she was still in her new dress, soaking wet from the rain. Her makeup spread black smudges across her face. "May I come in?" Violetta stepped back silently, letting her into the apartment. Angel peeked out of his room. "Dr. Salguero?" "Angel, honey, play in your room for now," Violetta said softly. She led Amarantha into the kitchen, turned on the kettle, pulled a clean towel and dry clothes from the closet. "Change your clothes. You'll tell me later." Amarantha mechanically wiped her hair, changed into Violetta's soft homemade suit. Her hands were still trembling. "Now tell me." Violetta placed a cup of hot tea in front of her. "What happened?" And Amarantha told everything. the pharmacy, the accidental return home, the overheard conversation about the Maldives and the offshore accounts. Violetta listened in silence, only her cheekbones flaring. When Amaranta finished, she stood up and took a bottle of cognac out of her locker. "I think this is more necessary than tea right now." "What should I do?" Amarantha wrapped her hands around the cup, trying to warm herself. "For starters, calm down and think." Violetta splashed cognac into the cup of tea. "You have until tomorrow. They don't know you heard everything, do they?" "No, they don't even know I was home." "Good, so you have an advantage. Now we have to figure out how to use it." At that moment, Amarantha's cell phone rang. Fabian's name popped up on the screen. "Don't answer it," Violetta said quickly. "Let him think you're in your painting lessons." The phone rang and rang. Then came the message. "Where are you? Why don't you answer?" "He's worried," Amarantha grinned bitterly. "Afraid I might have come home." "You can't stay alone," Violetta said firmly. "You'll spend the night at my place, and tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next." "But Angel will be only too happy. He still misses his favorite doctor." The phone rang again. This time it was Mercedes. "Can I answer it?" Amarantha asked. "Mercedes should know." Violetta nodded. Amaranta took a deep breath and pressed the answer button. "Hello?" "Finally. I've been trying to reach you all day. I have some news." "I have news too," Amarantha interrupted her. "And my news is more important." Mercedes arrived 20 minutes after the call. She flew into Violetta's apartment without even taking off her heels and froze when she saw Amaranta in someone else's clothes with wet hair. "Oh my God," was all she said, sinking into a chair. Violetta silently poured another cup of tea and brandy. Angel was already asleep in his room. Violetta had put him to bed early so he wouldn't hear the grown-ups talking. Amaranta told everything again, now to both friends. Mercedes listened, clenching her fists so that her knuckles turned white. "The Maldives, then," she gritted through her teeth. "And you know this isn't their first vacation together?" "What?" "Remember when I said I had news? I've been making inquiries. 3 weeks ago they flew to Rio, allegedly for a conference, except there was no conference." Amaranta remembered. Indeed, 3 weeks ago, Fabian had gone for 4 days. He came back tanned and rested, said the conference was at an oceanfront hotel. "And your news about the illegal deals turned out to be true," Mercedes continued. "A friend of mine works at the IRS. She says they've been looking at Fabian's company for a while now. Too much growth, strange transactions." "So what do we do now?" Violetta asked. Mercedes took out her cigarettes. "You could call the police right now. Tell them about the financial fraud." "No," Amaranta shook her head. "He'll be on a plane in time. He's got connections everywhere. He'll be alerted." "Then we'll wait until tomorrow. Let him try to get on the plane. That's where they'll get him." "What if he makes it?" "He won't," Mercedes said stiffly. "I'll take care of everything myself." Violetta stood up and began putting the cups away. "It's getting late. You need to get some sleep, Amaranta. Tomorrow is a big day." "Do you?" Amaranta looked at Mercedes. "And I'm going to go make some calls. I'll pick you up in the morning." When Mercedes left, Violetta made Amaranta's bed on the couch in the living room, brought clean linens, a pillow, a plaid. "Try to sleep. I'll be in the next room if you need anything." But sleep did not come. Amarantha lay in the dark, looking up at the ceiling. Images of the past flashed through her mind. Here she was with Fabian at a friend's wedding, where they had met. His smile, genuine, open. Their first date. He invited her to a small restaurant on the waterfront. They talked until closing time. Their own wedding. Modest, just close friends and family. When did everything change? Maybe the moment he first stepped over the law to save the company, or earlier, when success and money became more important than honesty and integrity. The phone vibrated again. Another message from Fabian. Why aren't you answering? I'm worried. Amarantha grinned. Worried? No. Just afraid his plan might go awry. That she might have suspected something, found out something. In the next room, Angel was sleeping quietly. His measured breathing reminded her of her work at the clinic, the dozens of little patients she'd helped, the grateful smiles of their parents. Why had she let that be taken away from her? Why had she agreed to become a beautiful doll in a golden cage? She stood up and walked to the window. The rain was still drumming on the glass. Footsteps were heard in the hallway. It was Violetta coming out of the bedroom. Can't sleep? She walked over to Amarantha. Remembering. You know, Violetta sat down on the windowsill. When my husband left, I couldn't sleep at night either. I kept thinking, how could I not have noticed, not realized before? Then I realized it wasn't me. Some people are just not capable of being faithful. They can't get enough of what they have. I loved him, Amarantha said quietly. I know, but now it's time to love yourself. They were silent for a moment, looking at the wet streets below. Then Violetta said, You know what the most important thing is? After betrayal, a new life begins, and it's often better than the one before. Do you think I can go back to work after all this? Of course. You remember, there's an opening at our clinic. Amarantha smiled for the first time in this long day. Thank you. For what? For being there for me. You and Mercedes, your true friends. Violetta hugged her. Now try to get some sleep. You'll need your strength tomorrow. But even back on the couch, Amarantha couldn't sleep. Scraps of an overheard conversation were spinning in her head. She'll be left with nothing. Naive fool. Maldives. Suddenly she sat up, pulled out her phone, opened the banking app. There it was. All their joint accounts were empty. Fabian had acted methodically, preparing to escape. Strangely, she felt no grief or despair, only cold rage and determination. Was he going to leave her with nothing? Well, let's see who would be left with nothing. She dialed Mercedes's number. Her friend answered after the first beep. You awake? No. Listen, I have an idea. They spent the next hour discussing a plan of action. Mercedes was right. The best thing to do was to hit where it hurts, money and reputation. By the time they finished talking, it was getting light. Amarantha finally felt tired. She lay down, wrapped in a blanket, and almost immediately fell into a heavy sleep. She awoke to the smell of coffee and children's laughter. Angel was already up and eating breakfast in the kitchen. Violetta was making pancakes. Good morning, Dr. Salguero, shouted the boy cheerfully. Mommy said you were spending the night at our place. Good morning, Angel. Amarantha tried to smooth back her disheveled hair. Coffee's on the table, Violetta said. Mercedes called. She'll be here in an hour. Amarantha looked at her phone. 10 missed ones from Fabian and a bunch of messages. The last one read, If you don't answer in an hour, I'll come looking for you. She grinned and wrote a short reply. Everything's fine. Was at an early workout at the gym, then went to the studio. I'll be home tonight. The reply came instantly. Okay, sweetie. Love you. Love you too, she typed, feeling everything inside freeze with disgust. Violetta set a plate of pancakes in front of her. Eat up. You'll need your strength today. Angel ran off to get ready for school, and the two of them were left alone in the kitchen. You haven't changed your mind? Violetta asked. No. He deserves everything that awaits him. The doorbell rang. Mercedes arrived, impeccably dressed and determined as always. Ready? She asked from the threshold. Amarantha nodded. She was ready to start a new life, a life where there would be no room for betrayal and lies. Mercedes parked the car 2 blocks from their mansion. Is Fabian still home? She asked, glancing at her watch. Amarantha checked her phone. Texted to say he's on his way to the office, meeting with investors. Investors? Mercedes snorted, probably discussing final details with Dolores. They waited another 15 minutes until Fabian's black Mercedes pulled out of the gate and disappeared around the corner. Now quickly, Mercedes turned to Amarante. Do you remember what to look for? Yes. Documents from the deal with the Paraguayan company. Account statements. Anything that can confirm financial fraud. They entered the house through the main entrance. The guards knew Amaranta and didn't ask questions. The hallway was business as usual. Expensive furniture, paintings on the walls, fresh flowers in vases. Only now it looked like a decoration that hid a lie behind it. Where do we start? Mercedes asked. With the study. They went up to the second floor. Fabian's office was locked, for the first time ever. Amaranta pulled out the spare key she had thoughtfully grabbed from her jewelry box. The office smelled of cigarettes and coffee. There was an empty cup on the desk and an ashtray of cigarette butts next to it. They searched the cabinets and desk drawers. Amaranta found a folder of documents on the Paraguayan deal. Everything was neatly organized into files. Look at this, she held out the papers to Mercedes. Is this what you need? Her friend quickly looked through the documents. Exactly. The whole scheme is in here. Shell companies, fictitious contracts. Your husband didn't try very hard to cover his tracks. He thought no one would look, Amaranta said bitterly. Amaranta found the laptop and held it out to her friend. Mercedes quickly opened Fabian's mail. Well, what do we have here? The correspondence with Dolores turned out to be huge. Hundreds of letters, first business, then increasingly personal. Meeting plans, photographs, talks of the future. And finally, tickets to the Maldives, hotel reservations. Print them all, Amarantha said, especially the financial transaction letters. While the printer worked, she continued her search. In the bottom drawer of her desk, she found another folder with real estate documents in the Maldives, a villa by the ocean, registered to an offshore company. So they've been planning this for a long time. Mercedes looked through the printouts. The first letters are dated 6 months ago. Amarantha froze. 6 months? But then... Yes, honey. When he told you about the problems in the company, about the Chinese investors, he'd already met with her. Amarantha sank into a chair. The bankruptcy story, the illegal deal, her quitting her job, was it all part of the plan? Did she and Dolores make it all up on purpose? This isn't the time to get discouraged, Mercedes put a hand on her shoulder. We need to check the guest bedroom. The bedroom looked immaculately cleaned, no sign of last night's date. But in the bathroom, Amarantha found an earring Dolores had forgotten, and in the trash can, a receipt from a jewelry store for a diamond bracelet. More proof for the piggy bank. Mercedes snapped a picture of the receipt on her phone. Suddenly, a door slammed downstairs. They froze. Senora, the housekeeper's voice. Are you home? Amaranta looked out into the hallway. Yes, Consuelo. I'm picking up the dry cleaning. Good, Senora. Senor Fabian called, asking about you. What did you tell him? That I hadn't seen you today. Thank you, Consuelo. I'll be leaving soon. They waited until the housekeeper's footsteps died down on the first floor. We must hurry, Mercedes whispered. He could come back at any moment. They went down to the parlor. Amarantha stopped by the fireplace where their wedding pictures stood. Taking one, she and Fabian so happy, so in love. Leave it, Mercedes said softly. It's the past. In the study, they gathered all the papers into a large folder. Mercedes copied the contents of the laptop onto a flash drive. Just in case he has time to delete anything. Before leaving, Amarantha went up to their bedroom. She opened the closet and pulled out a few dresses and business suits. She might need them tomorrow. She went into the bathroom for cosmetics and toiletries. On the shelf was a bottle of perfume, A gift from Fabian last Christmas. The most exquisite fragrance for the most beautiful woman, he'd said then. I wondered if it was the same bottle he'd given Dolores. The phone vibrated. A message from Fabian. "What's up, honey? Why don't we have dinner together?" She replied, "Sorry, late at the studio tonight, last class before the exhibition." "That's too bad. I'll see you at home then. Love you." Amarantha turned off her phone. "Ready?" Mercedes asked as she came downstairs with her bag. "Yes, let's go to your place." At the gallery, they laid out all the materials they had collected on the large table in Mercedes's office. "Okay." Mercedes pulled out a notepad. "What do we have?" "Documents on the illegal transaction, correspondence with Dolores, evidence of offshore real estate purchases, tickets to the Maldives, and proof of adultery," Amaranta added, laying out an earring and a receipt from a jewelry store. "More than enough." Mercedes picked up her phone. "I'm calling my friend at the IRS?" Amarantha hesitated for a second. Somewhere in the back of her mind there was still hope. Maybe it wasn't like that? Maybe there was some explanation. But the scene in the guest bedroom, their laughter, their talk about her, naive fool, stood before her eyes. "Call," she said firmly. "It's time to pay the bill." Mercedes dialed the number. "Hello, Carmen? Remember you were talking about the Irarrázaval company? I have something interesting for you." The morning began with rain. Amaranta woke up on the couch in the Mercedes gallery where they'd worked late into the night, systematizing the evidence they'd collected. Her neck stiffened, a dull ache throbbing in her temples. "Coffee?" Mercedes was already on her feet, impeccably dressed as always. "What time is it?" 7 in the morning. The police are expecting us by 9. Amarantha sat down, trying to get her thoughts in order. After calling Mercedes's friend at the IRS, events had moved swiftly. It turned out that Fabian's company had been under surveillance for some time now. Too many suspicious transactions, too rapid growth. "Are you sure they'll make it in time?" Amarantha picked up her coffee cup. "There's a flight to the Maldives tonight." "They'll make it." Mercedes handed her a fresh shirt. "Get changed. We need to stop by the notary to get copies of the documents certified." At 8 o'clock they were at the notary's office, an older man with a neat gray beard. He looked over all the papers carefully, making notes in a notepad. "A serious matter," he said, stamping the last sheet. "Very serious." Amarantha's phone rang again. Fabian. She dropped the call. "Keep your phone on," Mercedes said. "Let her think everything is going according to plan." The police department was already waiting for them. Carmen, Mercedes's friend from the IRS, sat at a table with 2 plainclothes policemen. "Señora Irarrázaval?" One of them stood up. "I'm Detective Montero. This is my colleague, Detective Rojas. We've been carefully studying the materials Señora Carmen sent us." For the next 2 hours, Amaranta recounted everything from the beginning. The story with the Chinese investors, the illegal deal, the money laundering through shell companies. The detectives listened intently, taking notes. "And when did you find out about the Maldives?" Montero asked. Amaranta recounted the overheard conversation, the tickets and documents found. "We don't have much time," said Rojas, looking at his watch. "The flight is at 8 o'clock this evening. We need to get all the paperwork ready in time for the arrest." "What if they try to leave early?" "We've already contacted the Border Patrol. They won't let them out of the country." At that moment, Amaranta's phone rang again. This time she answered. "Yes, honey?" "Where are you?" Fabian's voice sounded tense. "I called the studio. They said you canceled class." I got a headache. I'm at a friend's house." A pause. "Okay, we'll talk tonight." Amaranta glanced at the detectives. Montero nodded. "Go home now. We'll keep an eye on the house. As soon as he shows up, we'll start the operation." Mercedes drove her to the mansion. "Are you sure you can handle it?" "Yes, just wait nearby." Amarantha entered the house. The hallway was quiet. Apparently, Consuelo had taken the day off. On the living room table lay a note written in familiar, sloppy handwriting. "Look for a new job, beggar." She crumpled the paper in her fist. So he'd already done everything, transferred the money, picked up the paperwork. He thinks he's won? There was a noise upstairs. Someone was pacing in the bedroom. Amarantha climbed the stairs. The door was ajar. Fabian was putting things into a suitcase. On the bed lay his passport and tickets. "Going somewhere?" she asked from the threshold. He flinched. "I know everything, Fabian. About Dolores, about the money, about your plans. You left me a note, too, thinking you'd be gone before I arrived." He turned slowly. A flicker of fear flashed in his eyes, but was immediately replaced by his usual self-assurance. "And what are you going to do? You have no proof, and no money. I've transferred it all to safe accounts." "Really?" She smiled. "What about the Paraguayan deal documents? Your correspondence with Dolores? The data on the offshore purchase of the villa?" The fear in his eyes was now clear. "You wouldn't dare." "I already have. The police are on their way here, and the IRS too." Fabian rushed to the table, grabbed the phone. "Dolores? Get out of town now. She knows everything." But he didn't have time to finish. The front door rattled open downstairs, and heavy footsteps were heard on the stairs. "Police! Everybody stay where you are." Detectives Montero and Rojas entered the bedroom, holding up badges. "Fabian Irarrazabal, you are under arrest on suspicion of financial fraud and tax evasion." While one handcuffed Fabian, the other read him his rights. Amarantha stood in the doorway, watching the scene as if from the sidelines. "Señora," another policeman approached her, "we detained Señora Villagrana at the airport. She was trying to board a flight to Buenos Aires." Fabian twitched. "Dolores, you arrested her?" "Yes, Señor Irarrazabal, and found some very interesting documents on her. She's already testifying." As he was being led out, he tried to stop beside Amarantha. "Why? I gave you everything. A house, money, a beautiful life." "No, Fabian. You took everything from me. The job I loved, the respect I had for myself, my faith in love. But now I have it all back." She watched as they put him into the police car. Journalists had already gathered at the gate. Apparently someone had alerted them. Camera flashes illuminated Fabian's confused face. Mercedes came up behind her, put her arm around her shoulders. "Are you okay?" "Strangely, I'm relieved." "Let's get out of here. Violetta's waiting for us with tea and cake." They went out the back door, avoiding the journalists. In the car, Amarantha finally allowed herself to relax. "You know what the funny thing is? He really doesn't understand what he did wrong. Thinks money can make up for betrayal." "People like that never realize." Mercedes started the engine. "To them, everything has a price." "And for me, everything has value now," Amarantha said quietly. "Real value." The police station smelled of coffee and papers. Amarantha sat in the waiting room waiting to be called in for further testimony. Nearby, Mercedes's heel tapped nervously. She had insisted on accompanying her friend. "Señora Irarrazabal?" A young policeman appeared in the doorway. "Detective Montero is waiting for you." The detective's office was stuffy. Folders of documents were piled on the desk. A computer monitor showed some kind of financial summary. "Have a seat," Montero pointed to a chair. "We have some news." Amarantha sat down, folding her hands in her lap. She could feel her fingers twitching and clutched them tighter. "Señora Villagrana has agreed to cooperate with the investigation," the detective continued. "She revealed many interesting things about your husband's financial dealings." "Ex-husband," Amarantha corrected quietly. "Yes, I'm sorry. In any case, her testimony corroborates everything you've provided us. What's more, New details have come to light. He opened one of the folders. The story with the Chinese investors was completely fabricated. There were no actual problems with the company. It was a pretext to start illegal operations. Amarantha felt everything inside clench. So Fabian had purposely played out this whole spectacle of depression and despair on purpose? Made her worry, sympathize, support him. Your husband. Excuse me, ex-husband wants to talk to you, Montero said suddenly. Why? I don't know, but it's your right to agree or refuse. Amarantha hesitated. She wasn't sure she wanted to see Fabian. What could you say to a man who betrayed you in such cold blood? All right, she finally said. I'll talk to him. Fabian was led into the interrogation room, a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. He looked rumpled, his tie was off to the side, and stubble was showing through on his cheeks. You have 10 minutes, the guard said, and walked out. They were silent for a moment. Fabian looked at his hands lying on the table, no watch or cufflinks which had been confiscated when he was arrested. Why did you want to see me? Amarantha finally asked. He looked up. I wanted to understand. How long have you known? About what, exactly? About Dolores? About the stolen money? About the whole story about the problems at the company being a lie? Fabian shuddered. She told? Yes, your mistress turned out to be very talkative, especially when she realized you hadn't had time to transfer the money into her account. I was going to... He paused. Never mind. You didn't answer. How long ago? Amarantha leaned back in her chair. I heard your conversation in the guest bedroom. The one where you were discussing escape plans and making fun of the naive fool. He turned pale. You were at home? Yes, Fabian. I came back early because of a headache, and I heard everything, about the Maldives, about the stolen money, about how you planned to leave me with nothing. I would have left you the house. How generous, she grinned bitterly. You know what the worst part is? Not the cheating, not the stolen money. It's the way you played on my feelings. Made me believe the company was on the brink of ruin. Made me worry about you, support you. I had to come up with a reason for the illegal operations. And you chose the cruelest way, making your loving wife watch you supposedly suffer? Fabian averted his gaze. It was Dolores's idea. Of course it was, Amarantha stood up. It's always easier to blame someone else, but the plan was yours. You made the decisions. Have a seat, he stepped forward. I have a suggestion. What's that? I know where the money is hidden. Real money, not the crumbs the police found. If you'll take the statement. You don't get it, Fabian, she shook her head. I didn't do it for the money. I did it because it was the right thing to do. The right thing? He grinned. And what did you get? No money, no status, no... I got freedom, and I got my self-respect back. At that moment, the door opened. A guard walked in. Time's up. Amarantha headed for the exit but stopped at the door. You know, I should thank you. For what? He raised his eyebrows in surprise. For showing me the real value of all that money and status, and the real price of love, friendship, honesty. She walked out without looking back. Mercedes and Violetta were waiting for her in the hallway. How are you? Violetta hugged her. Fine. And it was true. For the first time in a long time, Amarantha felt truly good. Let's go. Mercedes took her under her arm. We have a lot of things to do. Like what? First, we'll pick up your paperwork from the old clinic. Then we're going to go check you into your new job. They walked out of the police station. A fine rain drizzled outside, but Amarantha was in no hurry to open her umbrella. This rain seemed to her to be cleansing, washing away all traces of her past life. At Mercedes's car, she turned around. The gray building of the police station loomed behind them. What are you thinking about? Violetta asked. About the fact that everything is just beginning. And that's a good thing? Amaranta smiled. Yes. Now I know for sure it's a good thing.